No, but what is this?
It's only the most read comics in the French language.
Oh. Huh. There is a very popular comic book in France about these ancestors. Young, old, recently immigrated. Like everyone has read these comics, Asterix and Obelix. And because of that, you may have an image in your mind of a Gaulois warrior with big mustaches and drinking pints of beer and hunting boar. But according to historians, that picture is very wrong. You see, Gaulois people were an advanced civilization that contributed important technologies to the world. Again, many that we still use today. And they're often overlooked in history. And I'll tell you why in a moment. So, just a side note here. In English we say Gaul, but I'll use the French term Gaulois because it's easier for my, like overloaded translation slave of a brain. All right? Okay, here we go. I had a lot of fun visiting some museums and even a few archaeological sites to understand more about these ancient peoples and how they lived. First up, the Gaulois had advanced technology. Yep, loads of technological advances were made in this period. Are you ready for this incomplete but insane list? Here we go. They invented the rotary mill, which is like to grind grain to make it into bread. They were the first to do that. Yeah. And then much later, the technology spread and became widely used across Europe, in the Roman Empire, among the Vikings. But it was the Gaulois people that were using it first. They invented loads of woodworking tools that we still use today, like the handsaw, the chisel, the plane, the auger, and they were masters of all kinds of advanced woodworking techniques, like special joints that allowed them to build large structures. Yeah, that's right, they had large structures. The Romans knew how to lay brick, but they definitely copied the Gaulois woodworking techniques. They didn't invent currency, but they did widely use coins. And each city and town had their own coin, usually with their ruler minting their face and name on it. Yeah, sound familiar? Which, this bit about the coins helps archaeologists to see that these people had extensive international trading relationships, well beyond just the Mediterranean. They also invented opera, which were very large fortified settlements, like towns, built on the top of hills. In Asterix and Obelix, every town they visit looks like a very quaint, tiny little village. But in fact, there were many, and I think we can call them cities because they had several thousands of citizens. By the way, I talk about these opera more in another video that I did in this series. You can check out the link here. Basically, they dug out the side of a hill to make the slope even steeper. Okay, look at this map. Do you see it? It shows different commercial production centers at that time. Oh my God, I'm just so in love with these kinds of maps. It comes from this book right here. Shout out to the authors of this book because it was just published this year and it has tons of maps and explanations detailing decades of archaeological digs in France. Yeah, I'm in love. So I'm gonna put the link in the description below if you want to check it out. I think it's like only available in France, but you can take a look. I absolutely love the little details about how towns would have different specializations because those kinds of things help me to imagine not only what the cities might have looked like, but really kind of like the shape and structure of their economy and society. So, I digress. Speaking of commercial production, they were major iron producers. From extracting to smelting, the size of their ironworks and the techniques that they were using really made an impression on the Romans. For example, they invented chainmail. right? Like, who would have thought? They had more effective helmets that protected not just their head, but also their chin. They invented a suspension system for their chariots. Like, whoa, that is some advanced mechanics. And guess what the Romans did? Well, yeah, they copied it. Because a comfy ride around the empire is kind of nice, I suppose. They also invented barrels, like the wooden kind with the metal. Yeah. These were better than the ceramic vase-shaped containers that the Romans and Greeks were using to transport their wine because, well, they broke less on rough roads, I suppose. But we still find these ceramic vases, amphorae, everywhere, especially in Coron. Take a look. And not that far from here either is a tavern where they found not only the collection of containers that were used to transport wine at that time, because they were not growing grapes in this region at that time, but they also found dice and, you can just imagine all sorts of camaraderie being built in this place. They were expert jewelry makers. They made lots of tiny detailed brooches and adorned their chariots with sculptures. They invented plows that rolled on wheels because that seems easier. They had roads and wooden bridges hundreds of years before the Romans, I might add. The Gauls weren't just warriors. They were really skilled engineers, metalworkers, and artisans. I mean, check out some of the work that they were doing. I saw some insane examples of jewelry at the museum in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. And this is just what archaeologists have found so far. They find new things every year. While Asterix and Obelix is funny and charming, the real Gaulois people were far more advanced than they are depicted in the comic books, and that we actually give them credit for. Speaking of the comic books, there are a lot of myths here that probably we should set straight. In Asterix and Obelix, they also portray the Gaulois as having big mustaches and winged helmets. And actually, there's really no evidence of that. We don't have any photos, obviously, but we do have a picture of Vercingetorix on his coin. And guess what? No mustache. And in archaeological digs, scissors and lots of little utensils for grooming, for cleaning ears were found. So there's no evidence to show that they weren't hygienic. It seems quite the opposite. And plus the winged helmet thing seems to be a misinterpretation of these rivets on the side of their helmets, which early archaeologists must have thought held something there, and in Roman writing there was something written about something tall on their helmets. But now archaeologists have looked more into the evidence, and it points to the fact that those rivets were there to hold on to chin protectors. That seems practical, to protect your chin in war, right? And eventually the Romans even copied those designs, and we later see those on Roman helmets. So, sensing a trend here? Also, did I mention that they invented soap? Yeah. So for all the jokes about them not washing and showering only once a year, well, they invented soap. So you can forget about that one too. All in all, the evidence here points to a modern civilization. As modern as any Greek society was at the time. They had theaters. Take a look at this one I saw in Coron. Not only is that an rebuilt Roman Gaulo theater, but they found traces of an original theater that was built 120 years BCE. You can imagine these two posts were the entryway to the public forum, because this side was a public square for people to meet and gather and have a market. I don't know, I just think that is so cool. They were living in a similar way to their neighbors around the bend in the Mediterranean. The thing is that they just didn't write it down. And that brings me to a really important point. There must have been a reason why they weren't writing things down. They had the means, they were drawing very elaborate drawings on their clay vases. When they did meet some Greeks that had settled in town, in the town that would eventually become Marseille. They even did write a little bit in Greek to help communicate for trade purposes with them. But for themselves, it was really rare to see anything written down. There was one tiny vase that I saw in the museum in Saint-Germain-en-Laye, just a few words that were written in Etruscan, which is the northern Italian language. But yeah, like that's it. Marion suggested that there could be a negative feeling about writing in the society that kept people from writing things down. Now, I found this book that talks about Druid Celtic culture, and it does use primary source texts. He claims to be a Druid himself. I would actually really like to meet him, but in any case, he says that for him and for the Druids that came before him, the power of the spoken word is more important because in their culture, it just has more weight. But an interesting map in my atlas here also shows many different types of religious buildings that were built after the Romans arrived. Apparently, they kind of forced the Gaulois people to build temples for the Roman gods, but for the local gods as well. But at least they did continue letting them worshiping their own gods, so, you know, that's a plus. And also they had to worship the emperor, apparently, but, you know, it could be worse. But if you ask me what the French and the Gaulois have in common, it's that they like wine and they like to whine. I'll be here all day, folks. If you enjoyed this video, please share with a friend who might also enjoy it. I have had so much fun exploring this site, exploring the other sites around here, and exploring the Auvergne region. The next video on my channel is exploring Auvergne, so check that one out. Definitely check out my Patreon page where you can buy me a coffee while I'm on the road, and also join my community. I would love to see you there. We are going to have live Q&As where you can ask all questions about French culture and about my time living in France. It's been 10 years since I moved here. I would love to see you there. Check it out. And in any case, I'll see you on the next video. Bye! I'm such a nerd.